Good morning, comrades. Today should be Friday. I think this will be uploaded by Friday. Haven't been uploading daily. We've been playing around with the schedule. The weekly is still coming out on Tuesday for sure, 100%. The rest of the days we're kind of playing around with. So if you don't know who we are, if you're listening for the first time, welcome. My name is Robert. This is a solo shot of Good Morning Comrade. Your socialist, communist adjacent news source and ranting platform that rails against everything that's terrible in your Facebook feed. So, again, we've been kind of playing around with the schedule, mostly because we're trying to avoid burnout. And then also, we have a hurricane and tropical storm headed our way, so everybody here in New Orleans is trying to hunker down. First, I want to go ahead and say thank you for the people who are signing up for the newsletter. Expect some really fun stuff soon. The newsletter. We have some promotional stuff I've been tying my head around to give away to our Patreon backers. So if you don't already, go to patreon.com, Good Morning Comrade, and support the show that way. That helps us keep the server costs paid. I wish we could do this show for free, but we cannot at this point. So any monetary support is really appreciated. Also, be sure to drop us a line at contact@goodmorningcomrade.com. Also, Comrade Morning on Twitter. You can find us there. And also, Good Morning Comrade on Facebook. You can interact with us. Thank you guys so much for your support. I track the stats. We're having exponential growth all across not only the country, but the world. And it's just a really awesome feeling to know that I'm not yelling into the void. We're not yelling into the ether. And thanks a lot. Oh, also give us a rate, a subscribe, a like, a review on your favorite podcast network, on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you're listening to this. That is super appreciated. Even if you cannot support the show monetarily through Patreon, that really helps us push the show out to more people. So thanks. Thanks a lot for all that. So like I alluded to earlier, we have a hurricane bearing down on us in New Orleans. And myself, Robert, I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, Florida. And I really don't have a lot of fear of storms at all. Like, storms don't worry me. Not one bit. The wind, the rain, it's whatever. Your stuff's either going to get destroyed or it's not. It's nothing you can worry about. There's nothing you can do except evacuate if you think it's going to be really bad, or hunker down if you don't. What I get really, really concerned about more than anything, and I kind of talked about what happened post-natural disaster on other earlier episodes, and I can't recommend enough the podcast It Could Happen Here, because they talk about not just theoretical things, but factual, what happened during and after, more importantly, after Hurricane Katrina here in this city, and when it pretty much became a lawless zone. National Guard wasn't here. The police had pulled out. Murders were taking place all over the city and the street, not by looters or organized black and brown gangs, but by white supremacists. You can Google this. Great book, Black Flags and Windmills. Google will take you to the New York Times. It'll take you to Washington Post. You can read all about that. So the special thing about New Orleans in times of a storm, as the storm is hunkering down us, as of right now, it's 1:07 p.m. The storm is supposed to be here in like an hour. I just checked Weather Channel. Weather Channel said it's been backed up a little bit, about 2 to 3 hours. The storm should hit. And then after that, there's a hurricane. After that storm blows through, there's a hurricane that's supposed to move through. So the governor's already declared a state of emergency. Good on him. So you can try to get some federal funds, have that in the pipeline if things get really bad. Thing about New Orleans is a bowl that's below sea level. So what that means is, forget a hurricane, forget a tropical storm, tropical depression. In a hard rain, this city can flood. I'm talking a foot of water. We just had a flood yesterday. We got like a foot of rain in like 2 hours or something. It was kind of freaky, but a freak storm, but still, the city flooded. The only thing that keeps us going are these pumps. And the pumps pump the water out of the city into Lake Pontchartrain. And almost all of them were working yesterday. I think it was like 18 out of the 20, which is pretty big because a lot of times they're not working. For whatever reasons. The city has been notoriously corrupt since its founding 300 years ago, and it's still corrupt and mismanaged to this day. Also, not only do we have to pray that the pumps are working so we don't lose all our property and our lives in the floods, we have to hope that the drains aren't flooded. The drains aren't clogged with fucking Mardi Gras beads. This is for real. I can't make this. You can't make this up. So I would say about a year ago, we had another flash freaky rain. City floods out. Everybody goes, what the hell's going on? Why aren't the pumps getting the water out? Pumps are working, blah, blah, blah. City investigates. They go into the sewage drains, the catch basins that are supposed to keep stuff from going in the sewer. They're clogged with literal tons of Chinese garbage Mardi Gras beads. You can't make this up. That's the kind of stuff we deal with here living in New Orleans. And I bring this up not only because I'm stressed out about it, I'm stressed out about rain and the flood and what happens after the flood. If a power goes out and we can't get services for days. Thank God for socialists, communists, and anarchists, because they're the people that are going to keep the city going like they did after Katrina. I'm just worried that with not just my own personal situation, with America in general, we're just one national disaster away from having this Band-Aid of society, of what we call civilized society, completely ripped away. And I don't think a lot of people have these conspiracy theories, I want to call them, of, this is the plan, it's to flush people out of the city, and, the government doesn't want to help people. I think even at its best, to give the government, I don't think the government can help people in a situation like that. Our United States government is just, our social services have been so chipped away by people who just, the right wing, not people, the right wing, who just hate government. They hate our system of government. They hate democracy. They want to privatize everything. And it's been so chipped away at to where when the next Hurricane Katrina happens, the government just cannot respond. They do not have the means to respond, which means, again, to rehash old ground that we've already talked about on this show, we really have to look out for each other. We have to look out for our neighbors and our community. So wherever you live, I'm sure wherever you live, a lot of us live in the South who listen to this show. We're starting to get a following on up north, which is surprising to me that we didn't have that following coastal north. And I guess because if I had to guess, the reason why we got a following in the South before we got a huge following in the coastal North is because the coastal North, the New England corridor, there's probably tons of shows. I mean, there's Chapo, there's just stuff that I listen to, Michael Brooks, all kinds of stuff that's based out of New York. There's not really a lot of like southern, south of the Mason-Dixon line based socialist media. So I guess we're kind of the vanguard in that regard. I know there's a ton out there, but there's not as much as there is on the East Coast and the West Coast. But my point is, wherever you live, climate change, global warming is going to touch you. There's going to be some kind of disaster that you're in the path of, and you have to make sure that you are ready to help your comrades, your family, your neighbors, your friends get through this, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. That's what a society is. That's what a society should be, and we're just getting away from that. And because look at your Facebook feed. Look at your Facebook feed, and you see always these quote unquote what are supposed to be heartwarming stories of, oh, this person in the neighborhood had this tragedy happen to them, and look, everybody chipped in, and now they got their problem solved, whether it be a medical bill or their house rebuilt or something like that. And everybody goes, oh, wow, why can't people do that all the time? And, oh, wow, look, there's still faith in humanity. Instead of saying, this should not be extraordinary. This is how society should work. We all live in a society where we all affect each other's lives. No man is an island. No man is a rock. And we are all interconnected. So to try not to sound like Marianne Williamson, like, why is this news that somebody got their medical bill taken care of when we should just have Medicare for all? Why is this news when somebody got their house rebuilt after a storm by the community, when housing should just be a right? Why is this news that a homeless person got fed by a restaurant when everybody should have access to food and clean water? So what's happened is our society has become so sick that it's taken things that should be a given in a tribal society, which is what we are. Like, we're a huge tribe of people. Like, you think about antiquity and you think about, we are the species of human, of Homo sapien, that we survived all our other ancestors. Like, our ancestors met other, upright, hairy apes that were also on the same evolutionary track that we are, and we beat them all. They're all gone. Neanderthals are gone. All these other species of human being went extinct because we stuck together and we took care of the tribe. And we've just gotten so far away from that even just basic acts of human kindness of what we should be doing is now seen as news and inspiring, when it should just be the status quo. And on an even more depressing note, I saw pictures from my local newspaper of New Orleanians, poor people, sitting in floodwaters. This is just yesterday. This isn't, Katrina. Sitting in floodwaters, waiting in floodwaters, sitting on a bus stop bench, waiting for, hope to God, the bus will come through so they can go to work. And if that ain't the most damned American thing I've ever seen, and I don't mean that with any kind of reverence, I mean that with disgust. People having to wade through disgusting floodwaters where their garbage cans are overturned and there's just trash, hot trash everywhere mixed with these water, because their bosses, because their company demands that whatever job they're doing, if it's not at a hospital or some kind of healthcare thing, whatever job they're doing is so important that these people need to risk life and limb and not be with their family in a time like this and say, yeah, you got to come to work. Instead of their corporation, their boss is frantically dialing all their employees up and saying, do not come to work. We are closed. Please stay safe. Please be with your family. It set me off to no end to see like this is where we're at as a society. Like we're pretty sick. We're pretty sick. And we need a huge fundamental change in not only in the way that we live our lives, the Green New Deal, so maybe we can stop all these freak storms while the earth frantically tries to cool itself off with hurricanes. You know, every hurricane now, every storm is a storm of the century. You know, how many storm of the centuries are we going to have this year as the earth frantically tries to cool itself? We need a whole new way of thinking that, you know, your job, you know, if you're doing what you love, that's fantastic. But for most people, you should be working to live, not living to work. That's kind of the European model. That's the way they look at it. And by the way, spoiler alert, they're much happier people, you know, and of course, Nordic countries and European countries are not a panacea, you know, but just that idea of I work to sustain myself. I don't sustain my being with my work. Unless that's something I chose to do, then by God, you're the luckiest man on earth. Go for it. But just flipping that way of thinking could benefit our society so much and get us closer to a new, I don't know, and get us closer to that utopia that we'll never reach, but we absolutely need to keep aspiring for. I remember I had an English professor, and he asked me once, he asked the class, he said, you know, what is everybody's here, you know, what do y'all want to be when you grow up? And it's cheesy. It's like a Hallmark card, and everybody said, I want to be X, I want to be Y. I think I said something like, I want to be a writer or a journalist. And he said, you know, nobody said they wanted to be happy. And that's corny. That's like the end of that's the end of a Hallmark card. But still, that's stuck with me all this time, and it applies. It's true. So with my last 15 or so minutes, I want to touch on the feud, on the death match, the battle between Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and good for nothing. Ooh, who's dialing me? I don't know. And good for nothing Nancy Pelosi. So here's the deal. I do understand where Nancy Pelosi's coming from with this feud. Nancy Pelosi is worthless. She's useless. So we'll just get to the meat of the conversation first. We'll get to my conclusion first, and then we'll work backwards from there. Nancy Pelosi is worthless. Now, she's worthless to you and I as working people, but she's not worthless to those who donate to her to keep her in power, to the corporations that do, and who donate to the DNC. She's not worthless to them. She upholds the status quo. She is controlled opposition. And before, you know, she's done so many great things, and she was this great activist from San Francisco that just got tired of HIV not getting talked about, and tired of seeing her gay friends die. I don't care what she did in the past. I only care about what she's doing right now and what she's been doing, and I care about the 8 years of an Obama presidency where the Democratic Party lost 1,000 seats. That's what I care about nationwide, 1,000 seats nationwide. For me and my friends who are working stiffs, working people, teachers, social workers, therapists, the Democratic Party as a whole, and she's the leader of the Democratic Party, they do no good for me at all. They are complete controlled opposition, and they think that they can court me and my friends by being just a little bit to the left of the extreme right wing who wants to destroy our society. And that's not going to work. And I'll say that that's not going to work for me. That's not going to work for the people that I speak for in this show. That gets no play with us. And I will be the first to admit that we take it too far. Sometimes with Bernie or bust, just as an example, which we'll go over this a million times, was not a thing. That's not why Clinton lost. But just that idea of, okay, we've got an election coming up. There's two candidates. They're both not the best. One is better than the other, so let's vote for the one that's a little bit better, and then we'll work the next primary to get somebody in who does have our values. We need to be taking that approach, that tactful approach. But I will shed 0 tears. To go back on my Warpath rant, I shed no tears for her, for the mainline Democratic Party, and for Nancy Pelosi in general when people like the quote-unquote squad, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, challenge her power. And they do it for the best of reasons. They're mad. Nancy Pelosi's mad because the squad and 100 other Democrats refused to vote for their funding bill to fund fucking ICE detention camps. So is that the resistance? That's the resistance that I've been told so much about, that the bills that she wants to get through, not to... My position is we tear those camps down brick by brick and liberate those people. And we can do it however we're going to do it. We can do it through the legislature. That's the best way to do it. I would love to do it through government and do it through voting. But this woman wants a more humane concentration camp. She's fine with those people being caged like animals, but she just wants them to have soap and toothpaste and quasi-clean water. Get the fuck out of here. That's the resistance. That's the Star Wars Princess Leia memes. Is that what Princess Leia was? She was like, oh, well, I'm fine with you blowing up Alderaan as long as we have funerals for everybody on Alderaan. I'm fine if you build the Death Star, but can we at least get a Whole Foods inside the Death Star, to serve up some organic food in the cafeteria of the Death Star? Is that the quote unquote resistance that I've been told I need to support? Because if that is it, which obviously it is, because that's what they're pushing forth, I want no part of that. And the idea that AOC is just some like crazy upstart who is just railing at the moon, a lot like what I do on this show. It's just barking at the moon, but she is not a legit legislator with actual plans and policies, and is just attacking whoever she can attack for some kind of Twitter cred. Is fucking ridiculous. Let's take a look, and I brought up let's take a look at some of these tweets that... Here's a tweet from AOC. And I quote, "A glass of water could have beaten a 20-year-old incumbent. The green dream or whatever, their public whatever." These aren't quotes from me. They're from the speaker, Nancy Pelosi. "Having respect for ourselves doesn't mean that we lacked respect for her. It means we won't let everyday people be dismissed." Let's start with the first one. A glass of water could have won that primary. And everybody says, Joe Biden saying, oh, she's a brilliant woman, and then backhand slaps her and says, oh, she just won a primary. No, she didn't just win a primary. She beat the Democratic DNC machine. She ousted Joe Crowley, who was second in line to be Speaker of the House. What are these people dreaming of? She is the literal 2 torpedoes going into the sewer vent of the Death Star. Good shot, kid. 1 in a million. That's her. Not, oh, she just won some primary somewhere. She took down Joe Crowley, who played around with going back into the race as an independent to try to take her down, and figured it would be a bad look and didn't want to lose again after the will of the people had already spoken. Unbelievable, the gall on these people. The way they will align. They have none of this venom that they have for this young woman, who, by the way, like, oh, and you hear from the right, she's just a dumb bartender. Well, wait a minute. I thought that was the American dream, right? To pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make a thing and make something of yourself. And this woman's done it. And they're like, oh, not like that. Not like, no, don't pull yourself from the bootstraps like that and challenge power. What you're supposed to do is, quote unquote, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, which is not a thing that actually happens in America. That's always bullshit. It's always pull yourself up by your privilege that you were either born with or given. And then what you're supposed to do is kick the ladder down so nobody else can get up. Well, what she's doing is she's crawled on her own bloody stumps, literal bloody stumps of her feet, which she had to go door to door and door knock in her district to win that race, something that the Democratic Party has completely forgotten how to do. They've forgotten how to talk to actual people because they spent so much time talking to their damn donors. They've forgotten how to do this. So her feet were calloused and bloody. She'll tell you that out of her own words. If you watch that, Knocking Down the House documentary or just anywhere she's talked about this. And pulled herself up. And not only is she not kicking the ladder down, she's deploying more fucking ladders. Showing the way for everybody to be involved in the political process and to take back over your government from a despotic party, which is the DNC. And I don't really talk much about, we've already written them off. We've already written the right wing off. So that's why I don't rail against them. I rather rail against the quote unquote centrist Democrats and the fake left, because those are the people we have to wake people up and be like, they are not your friends. And let me dive into that with my last couple minutes of why these people are not your friends. Because one, again, this venom that the Democratic Party, Biden, and Pelosi have against AOC, they have none of this venom for Trump. They have none of this venom from the right wing. They're ready to bend over backwards to serve the right wing because they all get their money from the same corporations that get them reelected. Let's read this Fox News piece that was published just an hour ago. And I'm going to read some of it to you. The thing is, the actual piece is not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the framing. This is by Alex Pappas of Fox News. Headline: Pelosi responds to AOC slam, says caucus has her back for condemning Chief of Staff's offensive tweet. Now, AOC slam, they called it a slam. Okay. There's the one thing there. It starts out with a nice picture of AOC looking kind of grumpy, which she's total right to look grumpy. Okay, that's another thing. Let's read this. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stood her ground Thursday in response to New York Democratic Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, claiming the speaker has been disrespectful to several minority lawmakers, saying she has the backing of her caucus and defending her handling of the rabble-rousing freshman squad that Ocasio-Cortez leads. Let's look at this fucking framing. Now, Fox News has nothing positive to say about Nancy Pelosi ever. Except when she's attacked from the left, you see who's friend and who they consider the real enemy is. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stood her ground. That's pretty positive coming from Fox News. Coming from somebody they've claimed has whatever San Francisco values means and that they claim to hate so much. This is all professional wrestling. When a quote unquote when a real person who can shake up the establishment, who can actually move things in a direction, who has a movement behind her. Again, you could also equate this to Bernie Sanders. You see what happens here. Both sides of this fake, phony professional wrestling work job, they both turn and they attack the person who's actually trying to get stuff done while defending each other. Pelosi defends Trump. Pelosi at least defends is strong. She plays nice with Trump. Fox News defends Pelosi, says that she stands her ground, calls Ocasio-Cortez a rabble-rouser. That's boomer language if I ever heard it, because Fox News demographic is like 70 and up. I think it's like 62 or 63, something like that, and up. Nobody under that age listens to them. You see how they act when an actual progressive, when an actual politician that wants to serve the people and not their donors it hits the stage. And it reminds me of the Donnie Deutsch, who's on, is that right, on CNBC, when he said, he gave the game away and said, I'd rather vote for Trump than vote for a socialist. Because I'll say it again, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, till this show's ended. These people are here to protect their class interests. They are not here to serve you. And I mean that. Even people on the right wing, Trump, the right wing, the GOP is there to protect their class interests. And they have the same class interests as the people in the Democratic Party. We need to figure out who are people who are really trying to deploy more ladders so we can all climb out of this mess of climate change, income inequality, and just abject poverty together, and see who's trying to knock ladders down. That's going to be my time for today. Make sure that you give us a like, a rate, a subscribe on iTunes, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Make sure you support the show through Patreon. We really appreciate that. Patreon.com. Good Morning Comrade. Hit us up at contact at Good Morning Comrade. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter at Comrade Morning. We really appreciate everybody listening. We will see you on Monday and then the long form show on Tuesday. Again, thank you so much and talk to you later.